in terms of its development rollout, particularly some of the changes that have happened in recent years with the advent of the cloud and SaaS and Amazon Web Services and new business models, the changes that have happened at the incumbent leaders like IBM and Oracle and SAP and other companies. It's going to be a really interesting panel. We're going to start off, though, with a question. So, do we have the Zeetings thing up? Tony, what do we have to do? Here we go. Okay. So this is a really interesting one. This is something that everybody deals with, all of us, every day. Happens 24 hours a day. Go on to Zeetings.com/always on, and you're going to be asked a question. The question is, does the return that you get from communications technology, and I'm talking email, messaging, social networks, justify the time that you put into it? Now, it seems like an obvious question, right? Because it's what we do with these communications technology. Obviously, there is tremendous return from these things, but think about the enormous inundation that all of us get in terms of messaging. Important ones, as well as spam and everything in between. And so we're going to come back to the question, but please do log on to Zeetings. Here you go. Here's the real-time thing. Does it justify it? So leave that up for a little bit, and we're going to start by going down the line and introducing the group. Why don't you go ahead and tell us what company you're with, what you do there, what your title is, and what you guys do.
Absolutely. My name is Sheldon. Owen. I'm the founder and CEO of a company called Unified Social. We are a data-driven marketing automation platform for professional marketers, so CMOs and global agencies. We allow for marketers to deliver their content, and as we know now in social marketing, it's now content-based advertising versus banner-based or ad-based. So we allow marketers to deliver their content to the right parties at the right time across any social network. So it's cross-channel publishing of content, cross-channel advertisement of content, and cross-channel measurement of content.
Awesome. And you've got a background in marketing. You were former with CA, done a bunch of different things, right?
Yeah. I come from enterprise software originally. CA had a small stint at a company called Peregrine, which is now HP, and then got recruited into the digital media space about 9 years ago, and saw that there was just a void in real technology in digital media. And so went back to my roots with a couple of my co-founders and created this cloud-based marketing platform. And really, we were a stealth company in 2011. Got into marketing automation kind of before some of the bigger enterprise companies like Adobe and Salesforce and Oracle started buying their way into this marketplace. So that's our background.
Awesome. If you guys could turn on the clock and set it at about 22 minutes or something. Tony?
Tony Surtees from Zeetings, and you've been using our software today. So we provide interactivity and intelligence into the otherwise broken and old-fashioned way of making presentations. So we enable presenters to understand what's happening in the audience as well as engaging better, because the presenter can pay the respect to the audience to ask the questions that are interesting to them.
Awesome. And your background?
School here in the US, originally from Australia. I started the e-commerce group at Yahoo in the late 90s. I'm involved in e-commerce, and I've also been involved with the Australian government in the venture capital industry in Australia.
Right. How many companies are you working with, advising right now?
I have 5, but I'm co-founder of Zeetings because, frankly, I sat in too many poor presentations, and both giving them and also taking them.
Awesome. That's great.
I'm Sheahan. I'm CEO, founder of the Octopi network. It's basically WhatsApp for the enterprise with integration into legacy systems. So we believe the future is going to be social, mobile, as well as legacy and security. There's thousands of apps out there that, whether it's Facebook, WhatsApp, iMessage, that we're sending information out back and forth, and we're going to have a 9/11 moment with security and enterprise with all the social. And we're trying to address that. We're just in private beta with the U.S. federal government, one of their agencies. And yeah, so we just launched it today, in fact, just got the call, so it's kind of exciting. But the company morphed when we moved to Silicon Valley. When I moved here a couple of years ago, I started a company called Red Oxygen out of Australia. I know I'm not Australian. I was there for about 10 years. And we did enterprise text messaging, which is probably the first social enterprise app, if you will. But we couldn't sell it in the U.S. because no one knew what text messaging was until about 2007, 2008. So when we finally came here, came on one market, and we saw the need and this opportunity that was being missed here.
Great, awesome. So I think we've got a pretty good universe of responses to the survey question, right? Which is, does the return you get from communication technology justify the time that you put into it? And you can see that we're only at 3 stars. A couple minutes ago, we were at 2.5. Right in the middle. And you know, it's remarkable because in theory, software is supposed to make life easier by automating processes and making things go faster, having perpetual storage and context and connectivity and more. And the idea is that software should allow us all to focus on higher order thinking. How well do you think it's working out? And more to the point, you know, how are you guys designing your products so that when you think about user interface and the workflow, you know, products have to work into people's workflow and life flow. If they're outside of it, they're not going to use it. So can you talk at a fairly simple level about what you guys are doing at your companies with your products in order to ensure that you know, your products are being used by people? Tony, why don't we start with you, because yours is so, you know, right, it's a very visceral product.
Well, we believe fundamentally that when a person gets up in front of a group of people, they are effectively blind and deaf to what the audience is actually feeling, what they're thinking.
God knows that's true today.
And also, there's no real seamless ability to be able to capture the intent of the audience from a follow-up point of view. So we make this seamless, or we make this smooth, or we make it very intuitive, using a connected device that everyone has. So we're actually solving a global or a universal problem with a universally distributed device. So presentations, generally speaking, whether you give them or whether we're attending one, generally produce a fairly poor return on investment. We actually produce benchmarks of performance to actually see whether or not we're getting an adequate return on investment with the ability to do something about it.
Great, awesome. So Sheldon, you work in an industry, first of all, you have really good traction in the market. You have a lot of large companies using your product. At the same time, you're in a market with a number of competitors. Going back to this question about how you create a product that people are going to use, what have you guys done and how is it that you're making it work?
So what we've done really is we first took kind of the premise that we're trying to build, you know, consumer engaging enterprise solutions. So think, you know, enterprise for a powerful consumer user. And since we're dealing with marketers as our core customer, you know, they love pretty pictures. They love to really kind of dive into their technology. It's simple, not complex. And so we have been really trying to create a simple engagement and workflow process. And so when we kind of thought about the architecture of the business, we thought, how can we build a product that can automate this brand new marketplace for them? And the competitors in the space, in our thesis, is that they're point solutions, right? They provide one piece of the answer to the problem. So if I'm looking to, you know, just publish my content, I use a tool to do that, but that data sits siloed. If I use one advertising tool, then that data sits siloed as well. If I use an insight tool, I've got to somehow extrapolate that data and manually connect it to some sort of insight measurement piece. And that fragmentation has created confusion. And so our model was, let's defrag this entire story. Let's build a holistic hub and spoke model. Let's build best-in-class applications on top of this data set so marketers can actually feel empowered. And then how do we insert our system, not just from a technology perspective, but workflow between teams? So you've got a creative agency, you've got an ad agency, you've got a brand manager. These people rarely kind of communicate simultaneously through one system. So we created workflow for that. The other piece was how do we create workflow between the actual end customer and the end publisher? And so there's been this rise in social around API management. And so we've been able to create an entire API form and management system on the back end, which simplifies the challenges that marketers have to keep up with the changes on these networks. And so one simple interface that aggregates the view. Today their solution is independent interfaces in each ecosystem or each social network. One simple database that we provide. Alternatively, it's fragmented data. One simple user tool set, or the alternative is fragmented tool sets. So we decided let's kind of streamline that entire process and give them the ability to kind of activate their data and aggregate it through one system. Took a lot of education because it is somewhat disruptive and new in the marketplace. But we also then created a seamless revenue model for them. So we didn't change the way they adopt this technology or the way that they buy their media. We inserted our technology into their overall order process. So it became very frictionless. And that was part of the kind of entire launch of the business. Make it frictionless for the user, make it frictionless for the executive, make it frictionless for the CFO office as well. That's really been kind of the strategy. And we took a page out of like Box.com's page book, right? Just very simple, but onboard it and off you go.
And it's working. It's working.
So,
Cool. So Tom, tell us about what you guys are doing. You guys have just launched with a government agency, and you are doing secure messaging that works across multiple messaging platforms.
Right.
You're probably dealing with a lot of volume. Is your company making things simpler?
Well,
more secure?
It's more secure. I mean, when we look at the enterprise, their motivating factors are, saving money, is going to be more secure, and can you integrate messaging applications? Your comment earlier about how you're providing tools for the enterprise. Well, the enterprise game had gone a big notch in the last 5 to 10 years because of bring your own devices and so forth. Because back in the old days, back in the 1990s and 2000s, right, you just had to make things look like other things. You had to make it look like Microsoft. You had to make it look like Lotus Notes, right? And this is what you did. You fit in the box. Away you go. What we've done now is we've opened the world up. So we basically are carrying in our pockets a mainframe, what we used to have security guards and waterfalls around, right? And none of this information is secure, right? So our customers are like, they see the writing on the wall, and they're like, this is scary. This is really scary, because I can steal one of your devices, hack into your information, that PIN code's about 10 minutes, I can hack into it, I can see all your data, your messages, your source, your login codes, and I can run havoc on your corporation, right? The CIOs see this, right? But they're also being driven by the consumer at the enterprise, which is I want something that's cute and fun to use, right? But they're also saying, hey, I have to have something secure. So we're trying to bridge the gap to support both of that. So hence we launched the Octopi network, which is IP-based messaging. It's pretty, as a company, we've had to educate ourselves on making something more user-friendly and more cutesy and more consumer. We've been an enterprise company in our past.
So in an age where there's a lot less privacy, right, with all the things that make things less private, how does security play into that? I mean, how
consumers don't care about it. Consumers are like, hey, look at my door, fine, whatever, I don't care. Snapchat, everything, we have our whole lives on there. And I think the reason why is it doesn't really affect their lives. I rent my house out on Airbnb, and they go, what if someone goes through the door? I'm like, I don't care if they go through my door. You know, they are welcome to. I buy my underwear in 6-packs. You look at my underwear, you can wear them, I'm fine.
Thank you for that data. Keep going.
But the important thing is security is going to matter when I'm having a conversation with my doctor, all right? But if I want to have a conversation with my doctor and he's at Kaiser, they're running Lotus Notes, right? So not only do I have to check the box for the Lotus Notes, but I have to have the secure communications. Like when a large pharmacy chain wants to go into beta with us, they were like, so some mother at 2 in the morning can have a secure chat conversation with the pharmacist on her iPad or iPhone. I'm like, yes. So that sensitive data that her kid is allergic to this or has this disease, that trusted relationship, that you are somewhat protected through HIPAA, but generally the laws lag behind what's going to happen. So probably, so you'll be protected with these personal, intimate conversations, whether it's with your banker, your doctor, your pharmacist, anything that's intimate that you don't want out in the open market. It's not going to be, I'm having a party Saturday night, come to my house and look at my fun pictures on Facebook. It's going to be much more important. So we're going to see a division of what people will pay for. Consumers won't pay for it, but enterprises will.
Cool. So Tony, going back to Zeetings, so we've all just participated in Zeetings. Obviously a very powerful tool that you guys have developed. What's the possibility for this technology? When you look out, what do you see off in the future as to where this goes?
Well, let me ask the audience a question. Since we have that orientation, unfortunately we can't ask it formally on us. Hands up. Who here gives presentations? Just put your hands up.
Who gives presentations?
Keep your hands up. Of those who haven't put their hands up, who sits in presentations?
Who sits in presentations?
Again,
right. Yeah, that's what I thought. That's good.
So I think ultimately we live in a much more interactive world. And so the potential for this is for presenters to not only be presenters face-to-face, they can be remote presenters, they can be in media. So a journalist can be doing a radio interview and the audience can instantly turn around and give a thumbs up or a thumbs down next time this politician asserts something which either makes a lot of sense or is complete hooey. So you get this sense of immediacy, and that can then translate into insights. So as business generally accelerates, you need to be able to separate signal from noise. You need to be able to follow up those prospects who are interested in you, who want to follow up, or those people who want to develop a relationship. So there's an unfathomably large number of presentations of any kind, whether it's in a classroom, or it's in conferences, or it's just 3 people across the table in a coffee shop, where we don't need paper, we don't need business cards, and you want to keep your own personal information in the cloud, which you can access on any device at any time. So the potential is really only constrained by the imagination of people using it and getting into the habit of using it.
Cool. It's been an amazing part of Always On, that's for sure. So Sheldon, let's turn the corner. Let's talk about analytics and usage of data. Data is exploding. Any large company has terabytes of it on their customers, on their suppliers. You are helping to serve up data in a way that enables managers to make better decisions and in terms of reaching their customers and what kinds of messaging to reach them with, right? Fair assessment. Are companies, as you look across the spectrum, and I'm including in this your non-customers, making the best use of analytics? Or could they be, is there something, where are we in terms of the growth plane of use of data in making good decisions?
Yeah, so my particular customers, think marketers, their goal, their KPI is to ultimately drive some sort of result for the dollars that they're investing into their marketing efforts, right? If
So why don't they leverage it effectively?
I think it's siloed. So you've got, in the case of a large global 100, who's one of my customers today, they have a media agency, they have a creative agency, they have brand managers internally managing 100 different brands. They've got hundreds of Facebook pages, hundreds of Twitter pages, hundreds of LinkedIn pages, and all of the data and the execution is happening in a silo, and they're not cross-communicating in any way, right? And so if I'm a creative agency and I'm creating content for this marketing message, I would like to get the results of that success of that campaign that I kind of published and pushed out. Some of that data doesn't make it all the way up to the top. Because you may have just an analytics team who studies the data by themselves in silo as well. And big agency today just announced a new role from a former CEO that ran a subdivision. He's now the chief data officer. And so, that's a representation that there's a gap in the market, right? And if we're creating now chief data officers, and we're creating CEOs of analytics divisions, that represents the fact that data is not it's not making its way upstream. It's still sitting in silos of fragmentation. I think enterprise, right? Years ago in the 90s, you had all these tiny little sub-networks on top of the network that your CTO would just run havoc on you when you had it. 30,000 employees at CA, we probably had 30,000 networks that were unauthorized. It's the same kind of problem with data in my industry, right? You've got some folks using Google Docs and kind of their version of Excel. You've got some folks using some homegrown BI tool. You've got some folks using Excel. And they're creating these kind of fragmented solutions to achieve their own KPIs within their departments or within their own teams. And that isn't making its way to the top. Also what's happening, and you probably have firsthand experience in this, but when a large corporation, the Fortune 100, decides that they are going to leave an agency who they've invested hundreds of millions into, decides that I'm going to leave, there's news, we've all heard probably Microsoft is going from Publicis SMG to Dentsu, right? When that transition happens, Microsoft wants all of the historical data to be transferred back or transferred to the new agency. The new agency then needs to kind of be able to spin that data up and understand that data and execute. A lot of that process is manual, it's fragmented, it's really a flash drive and a few pivot tables. So it's already an incomplete, inefficient process. I think how you solve these problems, there's a lot of investment in big data. I don't know if there's ever, why it became big data. I think marketers got their hands on that term, but data is data, and we need it to make better decisions. And I think that what businesses need to start to realize is that the more data they have, the greater BI that they can put into their business, the greater intelligence that they can have to make the best business results for their entire KPIs in the business. And I don't think, maybe your biggest companies are investing in that level, but I think there's that mid-level market that just have not invested in that aspect as much as maybe your larger companies do. That's what I find in my customer base, right? Your biggest advertisers, they have great data analytics, still fragmented, but they've invested a lot in trying to understand their customer, understand their ROI, understand their
So if it's a baseball game and we're looking across the entire business ecosystem, what inning are we in?
In data? I think we're fourth, maybe, at max.
Fourth
inning, I think. I don't think you're at the first.
Man,
I think there's markets already being built, but you're definitely not past. You could be even closer to third, but that's about it.
All right.
In my opinion.
All right. Excellent. You guys just set the time. I was just going to ask the last question, but I see we have. Can I do that?
Last question.
All right. Last question. So, so this is the best part. This is a question I would love asking. So when you guys look forward 5 years, 10 years, make a bold prediction. A bold prediction. It's got to be non-obvious. All right? We're going to start with you, Tony.
When you say 5 to 10 years, bold prediction, no one specifically.
Thank you. That's totally reasonable. In terms of what we're going to see in anything in the enterprise, you can pick something. It's a broad area. and you're an expert in certain areas, you can pick anything you want to say.
So let's forget about technology for a moment. Let's talk about commercial models and talk about the whole concept of disruption. So Mark Andreessen made a comment probably about 6 months ago where software was in the world. It's been a $1.5 billion fund which effectively invests in disruptive processes and technologies. So I think if you wanted to pick the tailwind industries, if you wanted to pick the areas of obvious opportunity, it's those organizations that relied upon information asymmetry. Consumers have becoming more empowered, and the cost of manipulating data in very large volumes, so that you don't take surveys, you actually know everything that's going on. Those insights can inform changes of business model. It's harder now to choose an industry that's not being disrupted, where newer, cheaper alternatives are not coming up. Then there are ones to actually say, well, that industry is stable for the foreseeable future. So one of the key things that really has to happen is to affect the psychology of decision makers in the United States and in every enterprise, public and private, to say that the biggest risk you can take is not taking the risk. And I think that's a certainty. That's not even a prediction.
What's the bold prediction? We're going to come back to you. Go ahead.
Okay. The next 5 to 10 years, the most interesting thing that's going to happen is the next 5 billion smartphones. So if you look globally, there's about 1 billion people that have smartphones, right? 60-70% Google, 20-30% Apple. These 5 billion are, Africa, Asia. Not that they don't want a smartphone, they can't afford one. Right? And what that's going to do from a political perspective, as far as access of information, starting up information as far as disrupting businesses, and it's going to go way beyond text messaging ever did, right? So we're really actually going to empower these 5 billion people, whether it's from a marketing perspective, a political perspective. It's really going to be disruptive to the world and humanity. Put a mainframe in somebody's pocket and see what happens. And, I think we're just on the cusp of what we're seeing from disruption. And not only just from a business perspective, but from a global perspective, political and so forth.
So you're saying big disruption?
Big disruption, great equalization. So when people have access to information, they can make better decisions, whether it's regarding health or their information about their government or empowering their crops. So it's exciting.
Absolutely.
So, and the game's far from over. So whether the guys down the street can come up with a sub-$20 phone, or it's the guys down in Cupertino, or it's Microsoft up in Washington, that game is far from over. So the guy that comes out with a cheap phone is going to win.
Sheldon, bold prediction, 5-10 years out.
I hope Uber allows me to pre-schedule pickup.
That would be a big accomplishment. I'm telling you.
Reasonable, but it seems like the obvious to me,
right? I understand that. That's magnificent.
I'd say the biggest prediction, at least kind of related, I think it becomes the predictive ability to kind of make decisions across our life, not just predictability on an ad to serve, but predictability on what food I should be eating because I have a certain type of blood pressure, a predictability that, if I'm trying to lose X amount of weight, I already know that if I eat for the next 4 days, I already know I've hit my goal. I think everything becomes a predictable stat, and that's all driven by data. And if you look at kind of some of the realities that are happening today, predictive science, data science is becoming now kind of just the way of life, right? And everything now has some sort of element of data science built into it. And if you can start to apply that data science into things that are just our normal everyday living, as I mentioned, kind of food, diet, health, I think you can start start to create a healthier lifestyle. And I think as a society, we can start to become healthier based off the predictive analysis of this data.
Awesome.
I could be churlish and say Tinder for over 50s.
Tinder for over 50s. You know? I'm on Tinder and it works for me, all right? That's all I can say.
I'm not looking in any direction.
You know? It works for me.
I think fundamentally the big prediction will be that individuals will be able to effectively put a request for quote out to companies who will want to sell them whatever, and companies will then bid on the right to sell them whatever that particular satisfaction of their need happens to be. So I think what we've seen in this flipping of the consumer control will go a lot further.
Great. So this last question was about bold predictions. And first, I'd like you to give it up for the panelists.